Well, good afternoon. You're listening to the new WCEG Network on WCEGTalkRadio.com. Click your live stream tab or watch us live on your smart TV, YouTube, WCEG Network. I'm Celeste Giordano with CelesteGiordano.com, your show host of Global Legacy and Wealth Building for the next hour. We're the worldwide community empowerment group where we speak life in the community. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and on Instagram at WCEG_talk_radio and at WCEG Network. We do have some new platforms under Apple. We also have some under Roku, and just look the WCEG Network. And our last but not least disclaimer, the topics and opinions are those of the show host and guest and not WCEG Network. Thank you for your continued support and happy Veterans Day to all of our listeners and guests. And we wish you a wonderful and blessed Veterans Day today. And we appreciate those that are currently serving. We appreciate those that have served in the past, and especially those that had given their life for our country. And I have two amazing women on the show here today. And the title of our show is Veterans and Entrepreneurship. And I would like to welcome Haley Yeagley and Austin Delorme to WCEG Network. Good afternoon, ladies. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having us.
Yes, absolutely. And Austin, we're glad to have you. You're our first time being a guest on our show here today, coming all the way from California. And Haley, this is your second time, and welcome back to WCEG Network. And before we get started, ladies, what I'd like to do is I would like to thank Penny Rogers and our WCEG Network family, the board of directors, for this opportunity and this platform that we get to speak life in the community and share with our listeners and our audience amazing people all over the world, just like we have here today. But we also have, it's either 8 or 9 amazing veterans that are hosts on WCEG Network. And I'd like to give a big shout out to Vivian, Reverend Patrina, Mr. Norman, Anthony Aiken, Herman Anderson, Joel Flint, Tiffany and Jeremy of the Veterans 2.0 show. Our hearts love your hearts, and happy Veterans Day. And thank you for everything that you do for our country and for WCEG Network. So with that, how's everybody doing today? Good?
Yeah, happy to be here.
And Haley, you're coming from Florida. And how's the weather down there in Florida?
Cold.
Cold? Absolutely. I saw some friends on social media. They're a little bit further south than you, and they were saying they just bought a new home down there, and they had a fireplace and said it was so cold. They were grateful to have a fireplace. And I grew up in Florida. We didn't even have air conditioner heating back in the early 60s because the weather, the climate and everything, we just didn't. As we lived in that house longer, of course, we had central heat and air, but it never got cold down there. I mean, you never really had a jacket or anything like that. And now, even in South Florida, when my husband was working in Miami, he said they would come in and they'd have their Parkers on and they would be freezing down there in Florida. So I'm sure.
We get the Arctic blast sometimes. We had 8 inches of snow this past February. It was the most snow recorded in Northwest Florida ever. So, I mean, it does happen.
But, well, people think that, that it doesn't snow down there and that it doesn't get real cold. But in North Florida, it does get much colder than South Florida. But South Florida and Mid Florida has, over the years, had some very, cold weather. How about out in California, Austin? Do you get some cold weather at all out there?
Oh man, we've got that desert vibe. So there's a temperature delta that's pretty big, right? So it'll get chilly at night and then it'll heat up, 30, 40 degrees throughout the day. But we don't really get cold. I mean, the Pacific Ocean's adds a lot of stability. I was talking to my son the other day and he was talking about Christmas. And he was like, we know it's going to be Christmas soon when we get a lot of rain. That's how you know it's going to be Christmas. And I grew up in upstate New York and I was like, yeah, I mean, I guess you're right. So it gets wet, but it doesn't really get cold.
Well, you're in a part of California that I've never been to, Sonoma country and wine country. And I'm sure it's absolutely gorgeous and beautiful there. And we're just glad to have you on the show. And I'm ready to get started and ready to introduce, I'm going to introduce Haley, and then I'm going to ask Haley to introduce you, Austin. I have known Haley for a very, very long time. She was like very, very little. And so it's over 30 years that I've known Haley, that's for sure. But Haley is an experienced acquisition professional with over a decade of experience working with the federal government and defense contractors to meet the critical needs of our nation's Department of Defense. Haley served 10 years on active duty as an acquisition officer in the United States Air Force for organizations that included Air Combat Command, Air Force Nuclear Weapons Center, Air Force Global Strike Command, Air Force Materiel Command, Air Force Life Cycle Management Center, and United States Special Operation Command. During her Air Force career, Haley was recognized for excellence in the acquisition community for leadership, efficiency, and program execution. After years of witnessing the difficulties small businesses can face in breaking into the federal space, Haley set a goal for helping small businesses through the complex systems of federal acquisitions. Her aim in the private sector is to use her experience and work ethic to positively impact innovative solutions and help businesses achieve strategic goals, navigating federal acquisitions in support of our national security framework. Haley continues as an Air Force reservist and as a civilian advises small businesses through the acquisition framework on anything from proposals to contract execution and management. Thank you, Haley. What an amazing bio there. You know, one thing that you didn't put in here, well, it's not, I'm sure it's not in your bio, but also you swam at the Air Force Academy. Is that not true?
Correct. Yes, I swam 4 years at the Air Force Academy when I was there.
Absolutely. And you have achieved so many amazing things. And, you know, I know your mom and your dad very, very well, and your most of your family. And we are just so very, very proud of you and all the things that you've accomplished in your lifetime. And probably one of the most greatest accomplishments just recently is little Madeline. So congratulations on that.
Mother, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. That was a lot. Thank you.
It is a lot.
No, so I am one of 3 founders of the company OXO Industries. We just call ourselves OXO. And we all have similar, but when you look at defense, pretty unique backgrounds. So our other co-founder who is not couldn't make it today, Megan Van Horn, she is kind of our contracting, arm of things. She was a contracting officer in the Air Force for just about 10 years as well. She has a lot of experience, similar to some of the organizations that you read off for me, very similar organizations in the Air Force, working anything from, very large programs to, very quick, very specialized programs. She has similar experience that I'll explain about Austin with some of the innovation arms with the Air Force. That has not always been a priority for the services, but, over the last decade or so, a lot of organizations have stood up, outreach, innovation. How can we reach small business? How can we get some, investment into, joint investment into these technologies? And so Megan, along with Austin, did that in active duty to try to stand up, on the Air Force side and honestly the DoD side in general, standing up those organizations. When she separated, she started her own consulting business, Bridge 4 Acquisitions. And I say that is relevant because it's how we all found each other. Austin, who is on the call, Austin Delorme, so also a veteran acquisitions officer. She has the most, I would say, most experience and most years, blood, sweat, and tears in helping develop what is currently an organization called AFWorks. It is kind of the premier front-running organization for the Air Force and innovation and small business outreach. Along with that, she was also pivotal in creating a couple of other innovation arms for the Army, for the Space Force, and just in general, also reaching out to the investment side of things. We're trying to get, we even on the outside as an ecosystem, we're trying to get everybody's buy-in. From small businesses to the government to investment arms. It takes a village. And so we are trying actively through our experiences. She is a physicist by trade, physicist turned entrepreneur. I am sure there's a connection there for how that came to be in her mind. And also a mom of two boys. And fun fact about Austin, a hot air balloonist. So her and her husband also do that as a hobby, but it's more like a lifestyle I've learned to be a hot air balloonist. So I've known Austin for over 10 years now. Megan and Austin have known each other for probably almost the same amount of time. We all had our own consulting businesses. So Austin's is Lionstone Advisors, and then mine is Black Dog Consulting. The three of us being peers and having worked together both in active duty and outside, we kind of came together to form OXO, and that's kind of us. I'll let Austin she gives the good story on how we kind of formed and why. But that is the three of us.
Thank you so much. That is just amazing. And Austin, we just want to welcome you to the show. And I would love for you to add to this story a little bit, because I just find what the three of you all have done and how you've come together, your individual consulting businesses, as well as the company you share together. I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe a little bit of origin story to bleed into that. So as Haley said, I was a nuclear physicist by education. I would say, and program manager by trade, as any good acquisition officer. So I was also acquisitions in the Air Force for about a decade. Because I was deep tech, I was in the laboratories. So I worked a little bit intelligence, a little bit laboratories, early stage tech development, with the challenge of how do I get these solutions into the hands of the warfighter so that we can actually make an impact on the operator? Turns out that's really hard. And most folks here that might be playing in defense or in the defense space will have heard that challenge of tech transition. From a company side, we suck at it just as bad inside. And so I was really frustrated with that problem. And I started to really dive into what are the solutions to that? How does tech transition happen? What are the factors halting it? And along the way, I learned a lot about this sort of sister ecosystem of small businesses in defense. And when I learned about what was happening there, I kind of chucked the labs out my mental purview. And I said, what about that? There's so much we should be leveraging. There's so many places where commercial industry is surpassing the development of defense tech dollars. I saw it all the time. And we should be leveraging more of that stuff that is being developed in the commercial industry that has this dual use application in commercial, because there's some stuff that hopefully there's never a commercial application for, like nuclear weapons as a great example, right? And so why aren't we doing more of that to make the money work the way that we can? And as I dove into that, I learned that a whole lot of horrible things. I sat and talked to investors, and I remember the first time I sat and talked to an investment team, and the guy looked at me and was like, yeah, if we see a company trying to work with defense, we devalue them by about 20% of the valuation we'd give them for a commercial deal, as an example. And I just made it my personal mission to solve that problem. Met a bunch of people along the way and went on to do a bunch of stuff in this defense tech space, but my heart and soul was with defense tech startups. And so when I finally separated for family reasons, to go start my family with my husband, I went down a whole bunch of different paths in supporting defense tech startups on the other side, because that's what I had been doing. It's what I was passionate about. Along the way, I ended up starting my own consulting firm, mostly because enough folks had asked me to, and I was kind of just giving out advice for free at that point. Megan and I had been working together for a while. She had done the same thing. And so we were talking, and Haley was just kind of talking about separating from the military. And I was like, we got an idea for you, right? And so then we're all consulting. And what we found is, man, on this side, on the other side, it was a lot of public-private policy. It was a lot of changing practices. It was understanding acquisitions and leveraging it different. There's a lot of creativity. It was kind of all over the place. On the commercial side, it was a lot of just repeating the same 5 pieces of advice over and over and over. And so we got together and we were like, man, there's got to be a better way to support these guys, because right now I feel like a broken record. And I feel like I'm getting everyone here and I'm not getting anyone here, or if I am, I'm very limited in the number that I can. And we all kind of had that same experience. So we came together just to start sharing knowledge publicly that we felt like were continuous asks. And we started a blog, and that was really the start of OXO. It was just writing together and kind of venting to each other peer to peer. And we started to get a lot of attention for that. Folks started reaching out, asking for support. And we said, well, rather than just, that direct consulting, what if we tried to provide some education to kind of raise all ships? And what we found was, in fact, about 50% of our business were these small businesses trying to grow. But there was this other chunk of business that was somewhat unexpected for us, which was other consultants that really understood the operational side of the business and did their best to consult small businesses on how to actually sell their product on the inside in terms of how do you make it useful, how do you make someone want to buy it, but really didn't understand the business rules. And what Haley, Megan, and I bring to the table is kind of a perfect trifecta of the broad set of business rules that make up the federal acquisition regulations and how those work in practice and what the culture is like on the business side of defense. And so what we bring to the table is really multiple different tools that provide education to those groups with the intent that a rising tide raises all ships.
That is amazing. Some of the things that you said, Austin, as a business consultant and with some of my clients, one of the first and foremost things that I work with clients is I say, in order to get edified and to get credibility, you need to give education first. And I encourage them to do blogs and to educate that, because that probably led to a lot of people who wanted to know more about who you were and what your company did. Is that not true?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we had people coming out of the woodwork kind of saying, okay, I don't know who you are entirely, but I know I want to work with you.
Absolutely. And so definitely I'd love for one of y'all to put, how they can go ahead and sign up for any of your blogs or your website. So I don't know, Austin or Haley, one of you, for our audience and listeners here today, could we put where they can go and register for your blog or where they can find you at? Go ahead and tell them, Austin, where they can find you, and then Haley, you can tell them next.
Yeah, well, I'm on LinkedIn, so our LinkedIn posts are in the chat here. We've also put up our website, and our blog is actually just posted on our website, and so we haven't updated that in a while. We're going to start posting again starting in the new year. But you'll see those blogs pop up, and we do throw them out on LinkedIn when those post, and so you'll see references to that post out there. And then we do have a newsletter. It's a quarterly newsletter. It gets a little deeper into some of these topics and highlights some of the blogs that got the most attention over the course of the quarter. And so that you can sign up for on our website. You'll see down at the bottom of the main page an opportunity to sign up for OXO Waypoints.
And our website is OXO, AUXOIND.com.
Very good. Thank you for that. Well, since this is Veterans Day here today, as veterans yourselves, why is Veterans Day important to you, Haley?
So I come from a long line of military veterans. Both my grandfathers served. My dad's dad was in the Navy in the Pacific in World War II. My uncle was in Vietnam. My other grandfather was in the Navy, kind of all over. And my dad grew up as a Navy brat, so it was not foreign to me, the military and service. But I actually was not one of those kids that knew from the age of 10 what I wanted to do or where I wanted to be. I didn't know that I wanted to be in the military, or I didn't know I wanted to be a doctor. I just, I didn't know. And I think part of it growing up, I maybe took a little bit of advantage of like, oh, this is just my world, and this is what these people know. And then I joined the military, and I think to me, there is no other experience I've ever had where in some form or fashion, like we all kind of understand each other in some very basic level, whether you loved the military, whether you hated it, whether you were in for a year or you were in for 30. There's just some kind of like, oh, you're a veteran, I was too. Right. And that's just, and maybe that's as far as the conversation goes, or maybe not. And I think that, my time in just seeing those people and appreciating those people and not just for what they did, but for, the impact that is made on this nation and on them and on their families and on their friends. And I think it's just a really important day to really honor, these decisions that people make for whatever reason to serve their country and what that means. And I think to me, I appreciated it more once I met more people and I understood, more experiences. And then just the heritage of my family. It just, to me, it's just an important, today, a day to reflect, I guess.
Absolutely. And I just appreciate your service and your dedication and your families, your grandparents and things of that nature, because of the people that have come before us, as well as the people now. This is what freedom is because of our veterans that we as business entrepreneurs have the freedom to have our own business and to give back to communities and give back to companies. And so we thank you very much for your service, your family's service. So what does Veterans Day mean to you, Austin?
Yeah, I think I'll echo Haley a little bit. Really just an abundance of gratitude. And for me, a lot of that is tied to this recognition that regardless of your politics, and regardless of how you feel about the military inherently, whether you view it as a tool of war or otherwise, the United States has a bullseye painted on its back. That is real. And there are a lot of threats to the life that we live and the freedoms that we have here. And it's a fairly small percentage of people that are willing to give up a lot of their own freedoms fundamentally
Yes,
and volunteer to make that ultimate sacrifice in order to keep that freedom for everybody. And so Veterans Day is really just that day of honor and recognition of the sacrifices people have made, not just in life, not just in the Memorial Day world, but in everything else. The kids who are following dad around and moving every 2 years and never get to plant roots. The moms and wives who never actually get to own a career because they're moving every 2 years and constantly have to start over. And of course, the moms and dads in uniform that are missing big moments and are giving up a lot of opportunities and are giving up a lot of choices so that they can serve and so that they can maintain those freedoms. I think just recognizing those folks, whether they did it for a year or they did it for 2 decades, and feeling that gratitude for them and what they've offered us.
absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Austin. And I'd like to take the time just to say I want to thank my husband, who spent 17 years in the Air Force. My dad was in the Navy, and I had a cousin and an uncle that was in the Navy, who are no longer with us. And we just want to thank their families and for all the service that they did, and the camaraderie that comes out of those that served in the military. You know, is just amazing. I was not a part of my husband's life when he was in the military, but I do know that in the 33 years that we've been married, the relationships that we have with his colleagues from the military, they were part of our wedding. They're part of our life now. Their children, their grandchildren, and things of this nature. And it's just a heartfelt feeling to know the sacrifices that they did and to hear the stories when they get together and the service. And, some of them had some very heroic things that they have done and experiences that people that have never served have no idea what they have gone through. And so with that being said, I just want to say thank you again to all the veterans out there, our audience, our listeners, WCEG Network host, as well as our guest here today. Thank you for your service. It means the world to us, and the freedom that you have given us and the sacrifices that you have made for yourself and your family. So thank you very much. Austin, I'd like to direct a question to you. If you could tell us about OXO and what inspired you to start that business.
Absolutely. I spoke a little bit to this earlier, but our intention was really how do we scale the knowledge? And the way I'll frame it is, if you ever heard the story of the guy dancing on the beach after a storm, and Someone's walking down the beach, they see this guy, they're dancing on the beach, just huge storm, and they're looking around and there's thousands and thousands and thousands of starfish. And it's, beautiful post-storm morning. He's watching this guy and he's wondering what he's doing. Why is he doing it? He gets closer and he realizes the guy's not dancing. He's actually picking up the starfish and he's throwing them into the water. And when he gets close enough, he looks around the beach, he's like, man, there's thousands of these things, hundreds of thousands of these things. And he goes to the guy and he says, what are you doing? You're never going to make a difference. The guy picks up a starfish, throws it in the water, looks at him and says, well, I made a difference for that one. And that's a lot what business consulting feels like, right? You look around and you're like, oh my God, there's so many companies that could make such a big impact on national defense and national security. And yet I'm over here and I'm dancing and I'm making a difference for that one. And as beautiful as that is, and as much as we love doing that, we recognize that there's kind of a baseline level of knowledge here that could push a whole lot more of those en masse into the water and create a bigger impact. And that's what OXO was all about. So OXO itself is actually a Greek god of growth. So it means to grow. And our intention is to grow the defense industrial base through knowledge, through shared, affordable access to knowledge. And so right now, if you want to go get the knowledge that you need to be successful inside of the defense industrial base, you need to essentially hire a consultant. And what you're going to pay is anywhere from, $300 to $1,000 an hour, or you're going to pay anywhere from like $6,000 to $15,000 a month on retainer. And that doesn't touch success fees and some of the other costs that afford you to do that. It's cost prohibitive for a lot of people to get that knowledge, and you're usually getting like one or two people. And one or two people only have pieces of information. And as a great example, Haley, Megan, and I were all acquisition officers in the Air Force, effectively, right? But if you dig down a little bit deeper, we all have tremendously different experience. And in fact, I wouldn't try to support somebody in the way that Haley can. I don't have that knowledge, right? And that's why I wanted her on my team. That's why we came together, because I know there's a gap there that she can fill that I cannot. And same with Megan. And so when you get one person, you're only getting pieces of knowledge. And our goal with OXO is how can we bring all of this knowledge together and make it affordable? I mean, we've worked really hard on a number of different ways to do that. Of course, our corporate education is a piece of that, and that is education designed to drive your team to be more knowledgeable. We work to educate consultants so that when you hire a consultant, they have some of this backbone of knowledge that's critical to anyone doing business with the government. So maybe you're getting someone who was a Marine and understands what it's like to be a Marine, and now they can give you that insight and how to actually sell your product to defense. And that's important, right? And we're also actually rolling out at the turn of the new year something we're calling OXO Access, which is going to be affordable bits of knowledge. That is, what is the information that I need right now to solve this problem? How do I fill out this form? What's the template for this process? What do I need to know here? Because most people aren't going to cram, decades worth of acquisition experience into their heads over the course of a 1 week seminar or something, right? So that form of education just isn't very effective. People want the information they need when they need it. And OXO Access is going to be effectively a digital library of knowledge, both templates and a compendium of knowledge that folks can get after for a relatively low price when you compare it to what you would have to pay a consultant. And so those are the core pieces of what we're doing and the goal of why we're doing it.
Absolutely. So what you were just saying, Austin, is starting in the new year, are you going to have a program where a company maybe has somebody that does some acquisition for them, but you're going to give them the education and teach them to be better at doing that, or as well as they could have the opportunity to hire your company to teach them or to represent them?
Yeah, absolutely. So we can teach, we can come in and do seminars, we can teach a team. We certainly do consulting. Consulting is consulting. It's expensive. You're paying by the hour. We try to buy down the cost of that with what we're rolling out in January, which is called OXO Access. And what that is an actual digital library of knowledge. So if you say, hey, I need to understand what this type of contract does, rather than having to call and pay $250 for, a half hour of time with someone who understands federal contracts, you can go in and say, tell me about the different types of federal contracts, and you can just go learn that piece of knowledge from someone who really knows it, not from a questionable source like ChatGPT, right?
Right.
So someone who's lived it and can talk about the nuances and realities of that. And so that's what OXO Access is. And then the other product we have is high performance coaching, which is really geared at, high performers looking to grow personally as they grow professionally. And of course, we tailor that towards leaders in defense technology.
So this are these going to be modules that they can purchase, and that are they video or recorded or written, all of the above, that they purchase and they learn from that?
It'll be a subscription with all access to everything that we've put out there. We'll be adding 2 to 3 modules a month, and it's going to be comprised of 2 different pieces. One is a template library. That's going to have templates that you can download and videos on how to actually fill those out and work through those. Some of those templates we have made, and they're just suggestions on how to get after it. Some of those templates are actually like, this is the DD form 2345, and I have no idea how to fill it out or what these questions are asking me. And we're going to talk you through how to fill out that form. So again, you don't have to go hire a consultant to do that. The other piece of that is going to be what we're calling the compendium, and those are just knowledge bites. So not necessarily any product that goes with them, but you can go in, you can get kind of the 101 brief summary, and you can sit and watch the video and gain some understanding.
That is awesome. That is exciting news. I didn't know about that, but that is exciting of what you're going to roll out in January of 2026 or the first part of 2026. So Haley, what role does your business play in national security?
So kind of, I mean, as Austin alluded to, and really kind of you have to go back in time a little bit. Historically, what has made, America able to, rapidly, evolve or manufacture scale has come from these large, prime contractors, and that's, fantastic. Like we have had the ability over the decades to turn and make changes where it's needed. In the past probably 20 or 30 years, it's no secret that, there's really been a really big downfall in small business and innovative technology that's entering, the Department of Defense. That's been something that people have been trying to get after for, I mean, well over a decade. How can we kind of bring in new technology? Because as the running joke goes, some guy in his garage like comes up with this widget and then it turns out it's like on a NASA spaceship or something, right? I mean, it's don't discredit, the small businesses or the people doing, small and innovative things. And what we all kind of learned is that, there are a lot of people that are making a lot of innovative technological advances that can benefit not just, commercial, but also can benefit the warfighter. And so the more, small businesses that we can reach, the more people that are trying to be innovative and, hey, I have this idea, I think maybe you could use it, in the US government as a whole, to be honest. We focus on defense, but there are other agencies within the government that are pulling in innovation as well. The more starfishes we can collect, right, is just like one more opportunity that we could help advance national security and and make it better, and meet the goals that are set forth, every so many years. There are goals and priorities that this nation puts out. And the more people that we can reach, the more people that we can help get into the federal marketplace, the more, we can do our part, even from the outside to help make the nation more secure.
Can I expand on that, Celeste? Do you mind?
Do what, Austin?
Do you mind if I expand on that a little bit?
No, I was going to ask you, did you have anything to add to that, Austin?
Yeah, so this has been a passion area of mine for the better part of a decade. So I'd love to just hit on some high points that I think are really important for folks to understand. First and foremost, there is absolutely no evidence that the United States of America can win a war with a consolidated industrial base. And in fact, the last time we were in a major peer-to-peer conflict, there were dozens, if not hundreds, of businesses that were active and robust participants in the defense industrial base. And you can go and you can look at sort of the history of consolidation, and that's been more a product of peacetime. And so we've consolidated down to these major defense primes, and a lot of that was actually driven by government activity. And we pushed and forced that. And so they've been slowly eating each other up into this small consolidated base. A couple of things happen when that occurs. One, we slow way down. And I'll share an anecdote that was really poignant to me when I came into this space. If you looked back in like Afghanistan during the surge stop loss period, right, and you looked at the number of IED attacks that were happening and the number of casualties, you'd see this like crazy little hump. And it would go like this. And what was happening is the Taliban was innovating, and then we were kind of solving that problem tactically. So soldiers were tactically solving the problem, we were slowing that down. And then they'd innovate again and casualties would go up and we'd solve that tactically, right? And that kept happening. And every time there's this hump, you're seeing this sort of evolution inside of the Taliban. And they were these like 6 to 8 month cycles of innovation. Simple stuff, right? During that time when we were trying to solve that problem and actually field technology on the acquisition side, what we called rapid acquisition took 2 to 3 years. That's fast. And thousands of people were hurt in that timeline. And the only reason that that was curtailed at all was because of the brilliance and tactics of the operators out in the field, right? I look at that as an acquisition officer and I see my failure because that's my job, right? I'm not risking life and limb, but my job is to protect theirs. And I'm not doing it well if fast for me allows multiple iterations of innovation by our adversaries. Of course, peer-to-peer is different, but we're seeing a similar impact when we look at what's happening in Ukraine right now, right? There's this rapid fielding of these small technologies, and it's not necessarily the missiles or the big industrial-based items that are winning the day. It's these small, cheap, low-cost drones. And I think the reality that we have yet to face is, hey, back in the 50s, back in the 40s and 30s, the majority of, and if you look at the last 100 years of humankind, the majority of major innovations of humankind were driven by US military need and US spending, right? But that's flipped its tail. In fact, the majority of innovation spending and R&D spending is now coming out of the commercial industry. And yet we're still buying inside of defense most of our tech through defense spending, right? We're not capturing all of that innovation that's happening on the commercial side. And that's why a small country has been able to hold its own for so long because they're rapidly grabbing that innovation. We see that in Israel too, as another beautiful case study of this. And so if we are truly saying, hey, we're in a place where we might be facing peer threats, then we need to be prepared for that in a real way. And the big game changer is going to be how rapidly can we bring technology to bear, not how exquisite the technology is. How quickly can we change it? And the only way that things change really quickly is if you have a broad, robust, competitive industrial base with lots of little guys who can move fast. Is there always a place for the primes? I'm of the faction that believes yes, they play a role, they'll always be here. But we have to have a much broader industrial base, and small businesses are critical to that. And there's not a lot of incentive, or hasn't been historically, for small businesses to come to participate, right? Largely, we've made it difficult. Investors haven't wanted to engage with them. The contracting processes are hard. The requirements are way too rigid. There's not enough flexibility for where they're actually making their money on the dual use commercial side, right? And I would say we've been working really hard over the last decade or so to make that change. But a bit of a call to action, if you have a technology that you think can make a difference in the Department of Defense, think about it. Think about it, because that could very well be the differentiator in maintaining our freedom and our national security if it does come to blows with a peer.
Thank you for that, Austin. That's quite a bit of information there, ladies. So, Haley, what advice would you give small businesses considering entering the federal market?
One of my big things when I'm talking to new, companies considering it is a lot of times people will see the government and they will either have been, suggested to enter due to investors, saying, hey, you should consider the defense marketplace because there's billions of dollars, or they see on TV that the DoD budget is, exceedingly high and they think, oh, wow, like maybe I can get some of that money. And one of my big questions up front is, what drove you to even consider, what drove you to spend the money to research getting into this market? And if the answer is because there's a lot of money in it, I would ask you to just take a step back.
Yeah.
And say, it's a lot. It is a lot of upfront costs. It's like entering any other market. You wouldn't, if you were selling anything, if you were selling adult clothes, but you were going to try to sell children's clothes. I mean, you wouldn't just on a whim go try to sell children's clothes. You would put in a lot of research and effort. You are pivoting markets. And I would, caution you to not spend lots of man hours if your motivation is money. My follow-on question to that is, if it's not money, what about your technology, made you think, hey, I can help, the government, I can help the DoD, and my number one piece of advice is always like, if you think you want to work for the DoD, before you do anything else, like take one step back and really analyze why that is. And if you keep coming to the same conclusion, like, no, I really think I can make a difference with whatever it is, whether it's hardware or software or a service or something, then I think take that next step. We just often see a lot of people that say, well, so-and-so told me that I should get in defense, and so I'm going to do it, and I'm going to apply to this solicitation, and I'm just going to spend all these man hours and just kind of blindly go after it. And I know that sounds crazy to the people listening that own businesses and have done business, but you would be shocked the number of times, Austin, Megan, and I have had that conversation with people where they just kind of think it's super easy. There's a lot of money. People are asking for innovation in small businesses, and I do it, and I'll just go get that money. And it's challenging. Like Austin said in the beginning, it requires a lot of time and effort, and time is money. And a not guaranteed, win or entry point. So one of my biggest pieces of advice is, really just think about what you want, take a step back, and critique your own self. And then if you feel really good about it, then go ahead and start doing that research and reaching out, generically Google, reach out to people like us, and kind of start doing a little bit of research on your own to make sure. I know Austin also has very strong feelings about this as well.
Well, and that's great advice, Haley, right there, because first of all, you definitely need to know your why. And you do, when I started my consulting business, I heard a lot of people, with my husband being in the military and being in the aviation industry, there's a lot of contracts out there. A lot of the colleagues have gone on to do some consulting because they've made relationships with companies that do business with the government. And you just don't go and, like, I hate to use this expression, but I think it's the way it is, that people think that they could just go and, just apply, that they're just, if you're one of few people, or if you're a minority or this or that, you've got a good chance of being selected or whatever. Because I believe 13 years ago when I started, isn't there a list that the government puts out, all the things that they have for bidding?
Well, there's a rolling list, like on a website called sam.gov, is pretty much all of the open, government solicitations that you can, look at any time.
Right. But again, I think, like you said, I think if you're wanting to go this route, and you've done your why, and you've centered yourself into that having a consultant to help you walk you through that is going to make that process a whole lot easier and a whole lot more profitable to get a contract with them.
And I would definitely like to add too, if we jokingly say this because we both love deeply, this country and what we're doing, but the United States government is a terrible customer. From a business point of view, it is incredibly slow. It is incredibly time consuming. There is a lot of turnover. There is a lot of wishy-washy. Yes, we like you. No, we don't. It is not for the weak. And it is not for people that are particularly in a hurry. And so, kind of to your point, it's not as simple as, I'm just going to go do business with the government. I mean, it is a marathon. And you have to be prepared to run it.
Right. Yes.
And so, it's an entirely different world, and requires a lot of, like any other business. I mean, it requires a lot of tenacity.
Absolutely. And some people, they think it's a sprint, and I love the scenario that you use, that it's a marathon, and it is a marathon. And if you're looking, it's not a get rich quick. You're not going to get answers immediately right away, because the government is very time consuming to do business with. So I'm going to go to Austin on this. So what are some of the biggest mistakes you see small businesses make in the federal market?
I'm going to be echoing Haley a little bit here in answer to that. So first and foremost on this whole sprint versus marathon, a lot of people do come in thinking they're going to make money fast, and they invest a lot without really thinking through that. And so the reality is, first time to first contract on average is 18 to 36 months. And so from the time you say, hey, I think I want to enter the federal market and start going down that pathway, it is 18 to 36 months before you get your first contract. And that's not even when you actually invoice your first deliverable and get money. Right. So again, coming in not prepared for how long it can take to get there. Are there scenarios and instances where we've seen companies get dollars way faster? Absolutely. And again, having a consultant can kind of help speed up those timelines for certain customers, but it's very relationship driven, and you really have to break through a barrier of expectation, and then there's a whole bunch of process involved. And so with those two things, you can only expedite it so much depending on what you do. The second thing we see a lot is folks coming in with this lack of realization that there are nuances to what you're going to sell to the government versus what you sell commercially. So it's not as simple as a copy and paste. I see this a lot with software in particular, where it's most impactful. So maybe you have a software product and you've had someone look at it that's like, oh man, when I was in the service, I wish I would have had that, right? And they're like, oh, this would be easy to sell because I just sell licenses. First of all, government doesn't buy that way necessarily. And so that's not as easy as it sounds. Right now, what you're offering as a software license service probably is currently like a body count thing. So it's a personnel payment. Two problems there. One, the money that pays for people is not the money that buys software, right? You talk about this appropriations colors of money issue inside the government. So it's not a one for one, you're going to save me money. The person that you're actually asking to spend money on the licenses saves nothing by firing people, right? And in fact, the government likes to employ people. And so your value proposition is probably not what you think it is. And then the third thing that folks don't think about in that scenario is, okay, now I've got to put it on a federal server. Maybe it's got to service a classified customer. That means I'm going to have my own instance sitting on a federal server that I'm going to have to separately update. How am I going to keep that updated? Because my typical like GitOps or cloud-based updates aren't going to work there. So I'm going to have a whole separate arm of engineering keeping that product updated. And there's a whole bunch of security requirements around it that I don't have to deal with over here. So in fact, I need to do a bunch of software engineering just to make my product fit over here. And now it's effectively a different product. So now I'm maintaining two product lines, and I did not go into the government thinking through that, right?
Right.
So I think it's just really sitting down and understanding what you're selling, what the land that you're selling into is. And I think the last thing I'd really like to touch on that Haley touched on a little bit with this, like government's a terrible customer. It's not just that government's a terrible customer. It's that your government customer is broken down to at minimum three different people that all have to be on the same page, and they probably have never spoken before. And that's hard. Whether you're selling B2B or you're selling direct to consumer, you're in a world where you can kind of say, this is my archetype. This is who I'm selling to. This is the value proposition. And that's stellar. And you may have a little more complexity where like, okay, well, it's B2B and I'm affecting the people here, but I also have to talk leadership into their bottom line. And that's the complex version, right? Inside of defense, you have this whole different ballgame going on where you've got the guy who's going to use it has no say on what gets purchased other than to say, yeah, I like that. Right? And a lot of people come and they're like, the guy who's going to use it loves it. And we're like, cool, doesn't matter. They don't have money. They don't have a credit card. They can't buy it. They don't own the requirement, right? Then there's the guy that owns the requirement. He used to be the guy that's going to use it. He's got a chip on his shoulder because he did it without it for 20 years and now he's in a leadership position and he's thinking very strategically. So if it's a tactical thing, you've got your work cut out for you, right? And then you've got the guy who's going to buy it, who's probably a technologist, has never been in the field before, and is thinking strictly in terms of tech specs, right? And so now you've got to convince all of them, this guy that he should put the money over here, this guy that this is the thing he should buy. And somehow the only guy that you've got advocating for you is the user who has no say in that. You can see very quickly how this house of cards, and we
Yeah.
haven't even touched on lobbying, Congress, defense leadership, national defense strategy, all of that, right?
Right.
So just recognizing that the level of complexity is very different and that the work you have to do from a customer discovery and value proposition generation perspective is layered and deep. And you have to do all of that before you decide this is actually the right place for me.
All right. So for all of our audience and listeners, That was a mouthful right there, Austin. But we have about 10 minutes left, and I have a couple of more very important questions for both of y'all. And Haley, what lessons from your military service have most shaped how you approach leadership, risk, and teamwork as a small business owner?
It's funny, we were all, Austin and Megan and I were kind of being philosophical about this question a couple of weeks ago, just kind of on a random Tuesday. I think one of the things, especially from a leadership and teamwork point of view that the military taught me. So, I was born, as you know, Celeste, I was born and raised in Georgia. I lived in the same county, my whole life till I moved to college. And when I went to the military, I met people from not just all over this country, but all over the world. And I continue to meet people from all kinds of backgrounds, from all kinds of places, forever. And what really being exposed to those people coming from their perspective was that not everybody needs the same type of leadership. Not everybody has the same type, not everybody is the same kind of follower. Not everybody needs the same kind of leadership. And I think that one of the things I learned is that you kind of, the phrase, you have to meet people where they are.
Right.
I really I think honed that in when I was in the military. And so coming out, especially working with all kinds of different, small businesses and people from all over and people that are focused on, really advancing all kinds of products was really that, like, there is no one size fits all to leadership. There is no one size fits all to teamwork, and that, being able to adapt and recognize when something's not working. I'm trying to communicate with this person and they're just not getting it, taking a step back and saying, okay, maybe I need to adapt. Maybe we need to adapt. Maybe we need to change something about the team. And really recognizing that, you can't just keep doing the same thing, if it's not working, is in really adapting, which is crazy, because the veterans listening to this call are going to say, like, okay, the military is like the worst at just like hurry up and wait or whatever. But really, truly, like, I think it's the exposure to people and working with people that has really kind of shaped how I approach things, which is that there's not like a one size fits all to any of that, and that you really need to be able to, check in and adjust and adapt, depending on who makes up your team and what you're doing.
And that's a great lesson there, Haley, because not everybody is a cookie cutter. And then that's one thing in my consulting business. I'm not a cookie cutter consulting business. I am a customized consulting business, that I customize programs for people. And that's what people are looking for. And being able to recognize that some people are not able to recognize to make customized decisions. They are structured and rigid, and they go by what's on a piece of paper or follow a systematic way. So I appreciate that. Austin, for you personally, how does being a veteran influence the mission or values behind your business today?
Beautiful question. To some degree, I think I kind of answered that, right? I believe strongly in national security. I believe strongly in the values that I believe that our nation stands for, and the future that my children are going to get to live. I spent a lot of time fighting for this mission of ensuring that we had the technological capacity and the innovative capacity to maintain those. And I believe that what we're doing inside of OXO and as consultants is continuing to grow that just outside of uniform.
Thank you very much for that, Austin. Haley, what inspired your service, and what would you say to those thinking about joining the service today?
Well, I guess, kind of part of it was my family. But like I said earlier, I was not the one that grew up knowing that this is what I wanted. The God's honest truth was that I wanted to go to a good school, and I wanted to swim Division I, and the Air Force Academy was there. And I thought, well, this would be fun. This would be cool. It's fine. What's, 5 years in the Air Force after, whatever. And I kind of did it. That was not some big to do. but it was honestly the greatest decision that I ever made. I didn't know at 18 when I made that decision that it would literally change my life. I met my husband while I was active duty. I met my very, very best friends in the entire world when I was active duty, who are still not only my friends, but my business partners now. Um, Not everyone has such a wonderful experience. Some people have awful experiences. And that's the nature of choice, right? That's the nature of just of life. But I personally, had a great experience and was inspired by personal reasons. So I think I would say to people considering it is that um, if you're considering it, good for you for even acknowledging that's an option. Recruiting is way down. I think people are just not interested for one reason or another, and that's great too. So if you're considering it, that's fantastic. I would say that, your reasonings are your own, whether you're trying to escape, a bad scenario and you're like, hey, I just think that I can learn a skill and go out and that's great. Or if you've wanted to do this your whole life, that's also great too. I think that whatever inspired you, don't be ashamed by what inspired you to join, just look into it. And I would say too that whether you learn a skill that can provide for you forever, I mean, I would never have dreamed that this is what I would be doing. Even when I was going to do 5 years and get out and be done. And I don't know exactly what I was going to do, but it was not going to have to do anything with the government. And here I am, and I love it. So I would say that, that it is possible, that you could join the military and learn a skill and do a thing that you could carry on forever. Or you could go in and you could meet people and think, hey, it's not for me, but you tried. I would say just like any other big decision, do a little bit of research. But if you're thinking about it, I think it definitely is for a lot of people. It's not for some. So just, look into it and think, hey, is this a big life choice that I want to make? Just like you would with anything else.
Absolutely. And and I'd like to add to this, Haley. As I look at this as opportunity recognition and money, maybe not going in making money, but people that make a lifetime career out of it can retire and live very well. So, and the military gives you good structure, it gives you leadership. Some people today, we live in a society today that they come from broken homes or divorces or things of this nature. They don't have the means to go to college or to do things. And the military is a great opportunity to help you be something bigger and better than you ever dreamed of being. So I appreciate you sharing that. Austin, what advice would you give to transitioning veterans on their value proposition in the business world?
Wow, I love this. You have so much more to offer than you realize to so many people. And I had this conversation actually with both Megan and Haley before they decided to separate. And I had the good fortune of at that point, I'd coached multiple Techstars teams, some groups, and I've worked with hundreds of companies at this point. Like I kind of knew what was missing when I left. And I remember sitting down with Haley and I was like, you just have to show up and talk. Like you don't know it yet, but your 10 years of experience is a treasure trove. And you'll get on the phone with a team and you'll just like spout a few casual things off and they'll be like, oh my God, I've spent a year trying to get this information. So whether you're a combat veteran or whether you're in acquisition service space, just recognize you're surrounded by people who've had the same experience, and so it feels like common knowledge. Also recognize you're the 1% of the nation that stood up and offered to serve, and therefore you are a hot commodity in the business industry. So I would say your knowledge in and of itself is you can sell it anywhere and it's going to add value to multiple teams. The other thing that I'll add is that leadership piece. I think for one, we're inundated with leadership philosophy and education throughout our entire career, kind of regardless of whether you're enlisted or an officer. And so that education and practice is huge. I personally felt that the military has pretty toxic practices. And so there's a bit of what not to do there. But then, being able to come out and execute that theory in a cleaner space is huge. And just having that knowledge and that experience and seeing how it can go awry, I think it can be tremendous for any company, big or small. And so those two pieces, that kind of 1% experience and that leadership knowledge, make you an asset anywhere you go. So show up and be confident. The frequency with which I talk to someone who's got 20 years of experience and I'm interviewing them and they're like, I just don't know if I have much to offer. I'm like, man, be confident. You do. And bring it to the table.
Absolutely. And I appreciate those words of wisdom. I have a thing called 3 C's, Austin, called confidence, control, and consistency. And you need to own that space right there. Ladies, we're at the top of the hour. This has been an amazing veteran show and such an honor and privilege to have your time and to interview you. And I want to thank you again for your service and the amazing things that you're doing in your lives personally and professionally. And for our audience and listeners, again, Haley, would you tell them how they can reach out to you, please?
Yes, so we are both on, all three of us are on LinkedIn, so you can search for us that way. And then also our website is www.auxoind.com.
Absolutely. So go check them out. And I'm going to tell you what, these two ladies, as well as Megan, that wasn't with us here today, they are your go-to people for the government contracts. I'm telling you that right now. And in closing, I want to thank WCEG Talk Radio for this opportunity, this platform. Again, want to thank our veterans that are host on WCEG. Thank you for your service. And I just so want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving and a Merry Christmas. And just to remember, it's a very sensitive time of year for a lot of people. And so please take time to check in on family and friends. You may not know if they're having a hard time, but it's a very critical and emotional time for a lot of people during the holidays. So please check in on them, but have a happy Thanksgiving and a Merry Christmas. And we will be back on January 13th with Global Legacy and Wealth Building. And until then, have a great day.